So welcome to the first of a series of monthly webcasts that we're going to do on the Apex GBS standards. And I hope you enjoy today's meeting and you come back for following installments, because we're going to have this running each month for a while. And I'm Tim Palmer. Most of you I know, so I'm not going to introduce myself further. But I will introduce what we're going to do. And what we're doing here is to take a chapter of version 2 of the standards book that we published last month and give you a chance to hear from the people that put it together, ask some questions. We'll have some Q&A at the end. So do think about what you want to say, put the questions in the chat, and we can open up the conversation as well around about hour if needed. So all of the authors of the Apex GBS standards are renowned GBS leaders that have come together into a committee to help raise the game for GBS practices across the world. And today we're going to talk about chapter 1, which is the GBS purpose and approach, which was authored by Robert and Mattijs. And I'm just going to ask them to share a little bit about themselves before we get started. So Robert, maybe just share a little bit about yourself before we start.
Thanks, Tim. And hello, everybody. Great to have you with us. I'm a GBS enthusiast. I've worked in GBS for the last 20 plus years, even though currently I'm in a state of semi-retirement where I really don't work that much anymore, other than advising like half a dozen companies on their GBS journey. And I really enjoy that. And next to that, I'm also part of the SSON World's Best GBS Award, which gives me the beautiful view across 100 plus companies that are submitting to be the world's best. And you can really see what's happening across the GBS industry from that, which is terrific to see. Previously, I used to work in GBS at Syngenta and Novartis, and delighted to be with you today.
Mattijs. Fantastic. Thank you. Mattijs, yeah.
Hey, everyone. It's good to see everyone. So my name is Mattijs. I am not semi-retired. I'm in the midst of the messy GBS transformation here at McDonald's, where I lead our enterprise transformation, meaning I work with all parts of the company to develop North Star visions and then bring them to life with transformation programs and capabilities underneath, which is a journey I've been on, for many decades at various companies. So I also call myself a GBS/transformation enthusiast, and it was really an honor to be, working especially with Robert on this first chapter, which is very much, I find, very eye-opening about what GBS can be and not be, and so it was quite intellectually challenging, quite frankly. So glad we have some time to dive deeper in this fascinating topic. What is even GBS?
So maybe Robert, let's start with the Apex project. Now, how did this come about, and what's the intent of the Apex committee?
Yeah, personally, I think the passion I have for this and the reason when we started discussing this, I was really sort of getting into it, is that I look at GBS as really a profession, as really basically a function in its own right. And I sort of grew a little bit frustrated by the fact that there's like hundreds of books written about finance, thousands of books about supply chain, marketing, HR, you name it. But there was nothing really describing what GBS really is and how you do a GBS. So when the idea was suggested to get a couple of us together and start putting our thoughts to paper, I thought, yeah, this absolutely fits to just take this GBS industry, the GBS profession, a lot more serious and treat it as if it's a function in its own right, which I absolutely believe it is, with a unique set of characteristics, a unique set of skills, and actually also a unique set of people that do really well in this space. As that's sort of the first reason, I think, why we started to do this. And second, as you said, Tim, the people that are at this and start to work at this, a small group first and now a larger group, I think all of them really just want to give back. They want to share their experience. They want to share their mistakes and maybe prevent people from making the same mistakes again. So that sort of giving back also, I think, is a big motivation behind why we're doing this.
Matthias talked about the importance of defining GBS. In fact, in the introduction section to the book, we talk about how you could go to 10 different companies with a GBS, and the executives would probably describe it in different ways. And then the whole book is premised on the adoption of a thing called the GBS construct. And we're going to develop the thinking around that construct as we go through the series of webcasts. And I just wondered if you could comment, but either or both of you, on what does this mean to you in practice? GBS construct in particular.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna say something I think is really funny because Robert, when you talked about GBS as a function, here at McDonald's, we deliberately have GBS as one of our 4 operating segments. And it was with the CEO, it was done in a very deliberate way. So there's a real reason why we don't call GBS a function. And it is internally at parity with our US business, our international business, etc. It is to really recognize that GBS is the only part of the organization that really cuts across the whole enterprise. It's an umbrella over the functions, not hierarchically speaking, but in its ability to truly stitch together different components of the company. So I do think when Robert and I start discussing this, Tim and everyone, we were very much like, is GBS an organization? Can you touch it? But then there's so many, to your point, when you ask 10 executives what GBS is, you get 20 different answers, right?
Yeah.
And I think we really quickly pivoted on the idea that GBS is more of a framework, a mindset, a construct that has certain things you can point at that makes it a GBS. So it's not like completely, we didn't want to be too abstract, but the way how you typically we go into like how many hubs you have, etc. But it actually doesn't matter for you to be called GBS. So construct is more, it gives you a little bit of intellectual freedom to, that's okay to define your version of a GBS differently than other companies. But there are certain things that are must-haves if you want to be seen as having an impact that a GBS construct can make.
And maybe just to build on that, there's a few things that we said you can sort of use to identify if there's a GBS in play in an organization, right? And one of the things is that there's sort of an open market model where the way that the operations are performed is not purely functionally siloed, is not just order taking, but it's really an open market model. Second, I think, as Mattijs already said, a GBS construct typically goes across geographies, goes across business unit, goes across functions. So it really is that enterprise-wide setup. And third, typically a GBS construct is busy with end-to-end process, is busy with standardization, is busy with a consistent deployment of skills and capabilities across the enterprise. These are sort of ways you always find with the GBS contract. However, the exact organizational diagram is then drawn.
Yeah, that's so sorry,
Yeah,
Matthias.
and I think Kiara asked a great question, right? So I'm sure that for many of you, this is a never-ending debate. So at McDonald's, given our inexperience in this a couple of years back, we did start calling it GBS. But it's interesting because within what we call GBS, there's the whole data analytics AI organization. There is the whole transformation organization sits in there. Like it's a much broader cut than your typical less mature GBS where you have a data officer that sits outside, or you have components of technology, or you have components of a parallel transformation, enterprise transformation organization. So we did brand it as GBS, but we are also coming to the conclusion that that creates more challenges than it actually helps because people see GBS more as an operating concept. It's a shared services in some shape or form. whereby at McDonald's, it's much more than a shared services, which kind of proves the point that GBS is a construct. But I did love it that you call it out and say, well, then what you call it, and we actually call it GBS, right? It just shows you, it shows you the challenge, quite frankly, with branding, because finance is finance. And even though some might include procurement, or some might like there's different ways how companies organize a finance function. When you say finance, everybody immediately understands what's in there. I think in GBS, it requires three follow-up questions, which is why Robert and I were very clear that, okay, we call it at McDonald's GBS, but we could call it anything, quite frankly, depending on what resonates with a company. But to Robert's point about what makes GBS unique, all of those things do apply to McDonald's.
That's it's an interesting conversation, and I was reminded when you started out there talking about not being a function, that in transparency, I and Kira, in fact, used to work for Robert at Novartis, and we were running the services organization for data and analytics and other commercial and scientific functions. And we said this is not a function because we carry with us different skill sets and motivations than a function. And it's the skill set and motivations of improvement and of KPI bit driven and of design and various other things are different, I think, from a traditional function. So the conversation really resonates for me on that level. Just moving on a little bit to talk about value. So in our first chapter of this book, we talk about the value that a GBS organization can create. Mattijs, I saw you posting on this on LinkedIn about the core benefits of a GBS model, and I wondered how you see the GBS approach, the GBS construct, change the discussion on value.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point, and quite frankly, some of the learnings I've had is that in the end, for GBS to be relevant, it needs to tie into the enterprise strategy. It cannot just be a appendix service organization, in my humble view. I think you will not be able to get the value that the model can give you as an organization. And I remember Robert and I had quite some spirited debates about that, because we've both been, I'm going to speak for Robert, but I think we've both been in situations where you were a little bit more of an appendix, but then we've also worked in situations where you were very much part of the enterprise strategy, and just the value that you can deliver between the models. And obviously, Filippo just joined, and he can write 5 books about that, giving his trailblazing work in P&G. I do think you always need to lead with value. And I think the value is way beyond the traditional efficiency component.
Yeah.
And Tim, you talked a little bit about data analytics. I've been in situations where the GBS construct delivered, for instance, pricing algorithms back to the business, right, to help with growth. And that is just a game changer in terms of how people look at your capability and what value it can deliver.
Yeah. And let me just ask a sub question to this does the way that value shifts in a GBS, does it change? Is it like instantaneous when you adopt a GBS construct or GBS model, or is it something that builds over, multiple years? So do you find that your colleagues immediately get it, or is it something that you have to build up to?
I think it's a muscle you got to train.
Yeah.
I mean, any organization that starts GBS anew, you got to train that muscle, and you got to train those capabilities, skills to be really relevant and impactful. I think the training these days is quicker than the training 20 years ago, because technology is so much easier and cheaper. But still, you got to train those things. I mean, the service orientation, solution orientation, process orientation, data orientation, it takes time to get that. Right?
Yeah.
And you got to learn it by making mistakes. You got to learn it by doing some transformations badly, and then improve on it, and hopefully go further from there.
Cool. Let's talk about mistakes if you don't mind, and I'll share one if you don't. But all of us on this call have started new GBS organizations and also transformed existing ones. And in the book, you share 5 principles for starting a GBS journey. And I just wondered, in starting out on this journey, is there any experiences you'd like to share with others, particularly mistakes you are prepared to admit?
Ma- Maybe I can start with two
Yeah.
sort of typical mistakes that I've made and that I've seen others make as well. One is if you start with the GBS transformation and you start changing any part of the business, it's sort of tempting to sort of say, I got this, don't worry about it. You're not gonna notice anything. It'll be fine. Um, and sort of overpromise how easy the journey is going to be.
Mm,
And it never is. It just never is, right? There's always something dumb going wrong somewhere, either in the organization, the tech, or the data, or the process, or whatever. Something goes wrong, and then people look at you and say, "Well, you said this was going to be easy. You said this was going to be, and now you're impacting the business." And so that sort of promising that it'll be fine is not good. And the one thing I've learned there is set and manage expectation, which means every time you start a change project as a GBS, just be honest about the fact that it's change means turbulence. Change means things will be rocky for a while, and it's just unavoidable. Um, and the second sort of is um, the how to change, right? How to make a change, and you can either go big bang with a big bang approach and change a whole chunk of activity in one go, or you can go small step by step.
mm,
And what I've probably done wrong various times is taken the wrong recipe for the wrong problem. So go big bang where actually agile small should have been better, and vice versa. Go agile
yeah.
small where big bang should have been better. Um, and 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 both are good options if you apply them to the right circumstances. But if you apply it to the wrong circumstances, it becomes a dog's breakfast, right?
You want to add anything, Matthias?
Yeah, I never make mistakes. Everybody knows that. I would say, building on what Robert said, the one thing I've learned a little bit is this there's a little bit of a fallacy by saying, let's start with the transactional work and the simple stuff,
Ah.
and then later we're going to move to more of the advanced capabilities. I think that there's not a or. I actually think you can do both at the same time. I actually recommend you cast a much wider net around GBS, and the way I've come around that is bringing executives of my companies to peers that have done that, where they see the talent, they see the output, they see the value.
Mm,
Their eyes get very hungry very quickly and say,
mm,
I want that. And I don't want the traditional kind of 1990s, 2000 more transactional driven GBS. So what I've learned is, once you are positioned more in a transactional corner and that's your brand, it's extremely hard
mm,
to get out of that, because people now paint you in that corner and that's where you play. It's very hard to then get progressively over years and decades kind of up the curve. And I see many of my peers have been struggling with that, to convince their executives to give them a broader hunting ground. So that's certainly one where I always recommend people, it's, cast a quite an aggressive vision of the value that a GBS construct can deliver to the company. I
mm,
think I think the other piece is, which I've made this mistake, and I still see many people around me doing the same. And I kind of, now that I'm aware of it, it makes me a little bit, sad in a way, is when GBS professionals meet, the first question is always, how many people do you have in your GBS? Because it's a badge of honor. If you have 1,000 or 5,000 or
yeah.
7,000, it shows how successful you are for the company to give you all this work. And where are your hubs? And what functions are in your remit, right? So we always like have this like bingo card comparison. But you never hear a chef say, "Oh, I operate 7 kitchens and 20 cooks," and it doesn't matter. It's what are the experiences, what are the outputs, what is the value that you generate? And
Yeah.
too much I see people in GBS, because sometimes we are positioned more as an appendix. We're almost fighting for this recognition in companies. So headcount becomes almost like the yardstick of our success. The more headcount, the more successful we are. And I've been guilty on that, right? You start even internally, like we've now 5,000 people, and then people around the room go like, so maybe that's too much, right? And it kind of like you get into you get unintentionally into a much different conversation. So I always recommend people to really focus on the value that you deliver every day, and especially why GBS is, quite frankly, in the construct, is the only one that's capable of delivering such value. Because to Robert's earlier point, we stitch things together across functions. GBS has the ability to take best practices from one market or geography to another. Nobody else has that. So that's the conversation I think we as leaders and GBS practitioners really need to hone in on. So next time you meet somebody in GBS, don't ask them how many people are in your GBS, but ask them about what experiences and value did you deliver to your business the last 6 months.
Wow, that's pretty profound, actually. The one of the mistakes I was going to share was not taking enough accountability for carrying that message of what the value is and how you achieve that value all the way up the line. And instead, thinking it was obvious or self-evident to other people, particularly CFO, COO types. And actually, you do need to personally go and carry that message, educate, but also not oversell. But take it and make sure that they understand and agree to that value as well. Just two more questions. So first is, in the first chapter of the book, you talk about different maturity levels for a GBS, and we've all seen different versions of this from different consultancies, and like level 1 to 5 or A to E or whatever the structure is. And the question is less about what's the maturity level, but if you were starting a new GBS today, a new journey, and had a magic wand, what would you wish for to accelerate your journey to maturity?
I think the main thing today, that is on the mind of many GBS heads and GBS leaders is what to do with this thing of AI. How does that play into my operation? How does it play into my company? Many companies are asking these questions, right? Because there's this supposedly trillion-dollar value out there that is to be had. So if there's a magic wand, it would be get the answer to how to deploy this stuff and how to deploy this properly and profoundly. I mean, next week I have about 25 heads of GBS together in Amsterdam, and we're going to talk about AI. And these are big successful companies, big successful GBS organizations, and very few of them actually have figured out what to do with this yet, right?
Yeah.
And so magic wand wide, knowing what to do with AI would be very useful, I think, at this point in time.
I
And
really
how
wish
to,
I was there. I wish I was there, Robert. I'd love to hear that conversation. Mattijs?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna build on Robert's a little bit in that 2 weeks ago we took a trip to California to meet with OpenAI, Google, Meta, Adobe, just to understand kind of the art of the possible, what's happening, so to speak. And it was very humbling, let's call it that way. And I had to give myself a big pep talk flying back, and you see all these smart people working 16 hours a day, reinventing the world around us. But the good news is, like, everybody feels behind on this topic, and nobody has been able to scale. And when you hear these great stories on LinkedIn or that, I can promise you half of it is bluff, if not 90%.
yeah.
But I do think, to Robert's point, like, if you come back to the cross-cutting capabilities that he and I were discussing in the book. I think there is something that, as I'm talking here at McDonald's about AI, and I have a voice in the company, and GBS has a big voice on AI. Think about what is GBS about and what is our strength, is our ability to, work with business leaders to create a North Star vision and then have the transformation programs and tools to then deploy and ensure adoption and ensure value of these initiatives. All of those capabilities that are inherent to a GBS construct apply to AI. Right? AI is not a tool, right? I mean, yes, we can just bring technology to the organization, no different than just another tool we did in the 90s, in the 2000s, 2010s. But unless there is adoption, unless there is rewiring of business processes, unless there is the change component that Robert talked about earlier, and the importance of that, none of this will stick. So naturally, I think companies will look to a GBS organization to help, bring the AI through the organization and ensure there is actually a return on the investment.
I totally second that. And actually, in preparing for next week's session, I spoke to most of the companies that are coming, and all of them are saying that either they're, like Mattijs says, they're being asked to take a leadership role in AI in their enterprise, or their AI teams, their IT teams are actually automatically navigating towards GBS because that's space where there's fruitful ground to work with. Whereas it's harder in other areas. It's harder. So I totally second that. This is a big opportunity with GBS.
So let me just take us to the last question, a closing question. And it has been inspiring to work with you on this chapter of the book, and I heard earlier you talking about the spirited conversations that you had when you put the first version together, and then now the second version. And the closing question is what one thing have you learned while working on the APEX standards that you are putting into practice in your own GBS work?
I can take that one first. So the one thing I find is I've been in this space almost, more than 25 years. And even though every management book says differently, you get to a point where you think you've known it all and you've seen it all. And you build your own narrative around GBS. You become very skilled at it, right? Because that's how you talk about it internally, etc. But I think through this process, working with Robert, but also working with other peers and really esteemed GBS leaders, learning from Filippo, who I always wanted to be when I grew up, right, is just so enriching. And I think one of the learnings for me is there's just so much to learn. And there is no single truth out there in the space of GBS. It's a quest. You're going to have to pick the components that work for you and then stitch them together in a way that you meet the company where it's at. Because one of the mistakes I've made that I haven't shared yet is when I was with Lufthansa, which is a very German engineering, pilots, operations company, and how we did transformation and GBS there, I then brought to Office Depot, which is a US retail quarterly earnings type of environment. When I presented the same model that was successful at Lufthansa, I got just blank stares. Like, who's this weird guy giving us all of this, right? So I think meeting companies where it's at and realizing that there is not a single way of success, but how do people on this call connect to their peers in the industry and really remain curious about what's out there is definitely something that I can highly recommend. So that's certainly one of my learnings. And even through my discussion with Robert about these cross-cutting horizontals, I've now put like 3 leaders in place. One is leading, like one group that leads the transformation capability. One is the kind of service management, capability management, knowledge management, operations. And then the next one we're going to put in place is like the whole innovation. How do we now create that flywheel of AI innovation, continuous churn? Was very much kind of born out of my conversations with Robert and other leaders. So I think it just shows the importance for us to not be too insular, but have an open mind on what has worked elsewhere.
I mean,
Yeah, very,
the
very
beauty
good.
of this, the work we've been doing, and certainly the second edition, and people will not know that, but the first edition was done by like a small group of 12 people. The second edition, we expanded the group, including yourself, Tim, and many others, and that made it ever so much more valuable because we got so many more different opinions and insights, and the talents, the diversity of thought that occurred was just tremendous. Um, and if there's one thing I'll take away is just how diverse GBS is and can be, and we try to capture it in the book and as good as we can. But it's really an inspiration for me as I work with many companies now to help them appreciate the value they can bring, and the different forms that can take. And it is pretty diverse.
Mm, mm. That's really inspiring way to end. And I mean, for me, it was inspiring to work on this, as I said, and I'm actually personally leaning on the chapter 6, which is the new chapter at the end of the book on data and decision capabilities, as we look and build that out where I'm working today. And um, as you say, every time you dig into this and you get curious, you end up learning something and some new techniques that you can put together in different ways. So let's go to the questions that we've got. And if anyone wants to speak, you're very welcome to. Dhruv can take people off mute if you want to. Christine's first question, how do you start building relationships with your peers across your organizations?
Let me have a go first. I think the key about that, in my experience, is to be intentional, to really understand that business relationship management, account management, stakeholder management is not something you do as an afterthought, but it's something you got to be super intentional about. And it's a job. It's really a job. Um, and the way I always try to go about that is by saying, look, if there's a senior leader in my team who runs an operation, who runs part of the GBS, then that senior leader also should double hat as a relationship manager into a certain part of the rest of the organization, representing all of GBS, not just their individual piece, but representing all of it. And that makes it intentional, that makes it a job, that makes it something that people are supposed to do. But it also promotes the collective ownership of GBS across the entire team. Whereas one of the risks that always is there in a GBS is that because it's so many different activities, so many different pieces, that everyone is just busy with their own thing, and only the leader sort of looks at the whole, which should not be like that. All of the leaders in GBS should feel they're ambassadors for the whole, and to promote that is something that you got to be very intentional about.
Yeah.
Maybe to build on what Robert said, but maybe with a slightly different angle. What I found with GBS, my wife has always been challenging me, like, why do you work in GBS? You're always breaking things down and you're always restructuring things, and it's not fun, right? It's not like marketing where you build something nice and people all clap. So I do think that GBS has an undertone of land grab and control, right? That's just, I think all of us can, I think we can write a book on that in itself, Robert, right? In this perspective. And I've come a long way to recognize that and have empathy, but then also try to disarm the organization and really position this more as a partnership and an amplification of what they're doing. And the way how I phrase this sometimes, like even working now with some of our C-suite executives here at McDonald's, is like GBS is a partner. It's not replacing your functional strategy or your vision, but we help you to get it on paper. But then we have the plumbing and piping done so that your vision can be delivered, through the organization. So we are here to help you, not to take away something from you. And I think once you're able to build that trust with your peers and with your, with the broader organization, that GBS is not here to replace It's really here to enhance and amplify our company strategy. It takes time, in all fairness, but I do feel once you've built that trust, it's very much pitched as a partnership. But to Robert's point, that in itself is a full-time job. Just to the thought process behind it, making sure you make time for that, rather than running your nobody cares about your KPIs. Like I've had green KPIs and be killed, and I've had red KPIs and be celebrated. The two are not connected, right? What ultimately drives the success of the GBS is the ability of its leadership to build meaningful connections and integrate themselves in the company's ways of working. That's, for me, is the single most biggest contributor to the success of GBS.
Well, that's quite a soundbite there. I mean, that's pretty powerful. Sorry, Christine, did you want to come back at all?
No, I was just going to say thank you. I think what they brought up, it really resonates, especially with the GBS that we're trying to build. And I appreciate that. I think it's powerful what you just said in the end there, that like no one cares about KPIs. I mean, they do, but it's not connected with how they trust you and build that relationship with you. It's more about being open and transparent. And that's why I think sometimes we are celebrated for red KPIs, because at least we're showing them, which is exciting. So thank you. I really appreciate your thoughts on that.
No, and maybe build on that. What I've seen in the past is a pattern that the ability of an enterprise to trust a GBS organization is the trust it has in its leaders. And to your point, trust can come from red KPIs and showcasing that we have issues, but this is the problem. It's how we're fixing it. So I do think that we need to make sure that we spend enough time on I think that's the core message that Robert started with. Like, relationship management absolutely matters.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
Does anybody else want to ask a question before we close out the call? We have time for another one, but
Yes,
no need if you don't. Please do.
Yeah. Hello. May I?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. It's Alex. Just two words about myself. I worked for team for 4 years when I was at Novartis, and prior to that, I spent, I think, around 7.5 years building shared services with IBM. So my question is about, actually, I started typing the question so I can actually read my question, but actually my question is about AI and all this ambiguity that we've been facing. My point is that, artificial intelligence as such has been present for at least a decade. We are talking about machine learning, face recognition, image recognition, speech recognition, fraud detection, all these things that are AI and what people call AI. And all this sudden ambiguities is caused by LLMs, in fact. And LLMs were just at its inception were just a thought experiment. So it was about how to build structured logical data sets and then feed this to the neural networks, and they sort of create this emulation of human beings, and this is fascinating. And but this technology is not precise. This technology hallucinates. At least 20 up to 40% of information is based on hallucination. So in a very structured environment of GBS, where we have KPIs, where we have precision, where we have, Lean Six Sigma, all this stuff, which is all driven by precision. So I think it's time to say that in its current form, LLMs are useless in this environment. So let's stick to what works. I mean, machine learning in its essence, and let's stop this sort of game of pretending that LLMs are, a technology that can be applied. And I think that all this ambiguity is caused by people unable to distinguish, what is AI and what is not AI, and and people are throwing into this bag all these terms, and and creating something that is too much to eat and too much to digest, and then we have a problem like Deloitte that is paying some penalties, or a finance institution that is forcing people to go to training about prompts. So they could as well send them to critical reasoning course, right? Instead of sending. Yeah, you see, my point is about creating a very distinct sort of line and saying that this technology is useful and this technology is just a concept, and let's stop pretending that that's my question.
Well, let's let Robert or Mattijs or both just comment on that.
Maybe just two reflections on that, Alex. The whole LLM play, and of course the ChatGPT Copilot as a big show of that is really, it's interesting, it's fun, and loads of people are using it. It isn't proven to make any real dent in the GBS operations at the moment. What I am seeing, though, that is starting to make a dent in GBS operations are more company-specific AI deployments based on company data and company process. The few examples that I've seen so far are in that space, more so than in the let's give everybody prompt training for Copilot. It's fun, but it doesn't do much in reality in order to win in the market, in order to improve really the performance of your company. However, the company-specific AI deployments, there's a few examples I know of now, and I'm not privy to disclose it here, but they are working really well and making a real tangible impact in the GBS operation in those companies.
Hey, Alex, let me turn this around a little bit. Maybe that will help. So first, I agree with Robert. Like the way I'm looking at it, there's kind of like three modalities to AI, right? One is it can just help everybody to be more productive. Like I have an agent that is called our CEO.ai, right? That every time I go talk to him, I go to that LLM model, but in our case, it's Copilot, and I make sure it helps me to prepare for the meeting. It scans my emails, what is he happy about? What's he not happy about? All those things. So I think collectively in organizations, that's a productivity play in some shape or form. We just haven't figured out how to get there. So, by the way, it's nothing to do with GBS, to Robert's point. I do think that AI, the technical capability, there's two things that are different in my view. One is the technical capabilities of AI are far superior to some of the machine learning, more rigid approaches that you talked about. Like for instance, when we look at knowledge management and knowledge articles, like the ability to self-tag, there are things that we were not able to do 5 years ago with machine learning that now we are able to do through more of the agentic AI. So I do think we need to recognize that the technology, even in the marketing space, right, the ability to create, imagery and all of that is vastly superior than what machine learning was able to do. However, coming back to the point I made before, what AI has done and will do, in my view, for those of you that play it right, it emphasizes the need for a GBS organization that now that everybody's in on the game of machine learning, to use your own words, Alex, nobody cared about it 5 years ago, right? But now that CEOs and C-suites want to talk to their peers about what they're doing on AI, GBS is the vehicle by which you can now start deploying some of those company solutions that Robert talked about. And I think that's the big difference, because GBS, to your point, Alex, was deploying machine learning initiatives to create better accuracy or more efficiency, but it wasn't really well advertised outside of the four walls of GBS. I think now we have an opportunity to really play a role in the whole deployment of AI solutions in the company that are, quite frankly, technology vastly superior and have a much wider use case than strictly machine learning. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to, I hope that helps, Alex. I'm going to bring the discussion to a close. And I'd really like to thank both of you for spending so much quality time with us, and also everybody for joining, and also anyone that's watching this in the future on a recorded version, which we're going to post. I'm just going to pick 3 things out from the conversations that really hit me. The first was where Robert started. GBS is a profession. That's why we did this, and we want to give back. So that's the rationale for why Apex exists. I really like Mattijs's insistence that the GBS organization or the GPS construct needs to fit into the enterprise strategy, and then meet the company where it's at, was one of the phrases that came out of that conversation. And then we had a really good conversation about intentional account management, business relationship management being key to the success of a GBS organization or construct. And then we finish, I think, on a very high note, which is that although AI is difficult and proving difficult, it is actually something that's starting to work. And Robert, Mattijs, your comments give me hope that we can also replicate that where I'm working, and I know we will. So I'll bring the call to a close. Just to say that we're going to do this again in a month's time, and we're going to be focusing on the second chapter around service delivery operations with the authors Angela Mangiapane and Ajay Anand. And the invitations will come out via LinkedIn, and I will make sure that everybody that's joined this call gets an invite. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you again next month.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim, for hosting us.
Hey, cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.